this problem is not going away. And the only way we're going to solve this problem is to communicate, share stories, share lessons learned, share new best practices. And so Foresite is a partner with Catalyst, and we do all things cyber, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to spend any time really promoting that. Yeah, that picture is horrible. Anyway, I've been working in DoD in the intelligence community for 30 years, and most of the things we did over there was build big data platforms for what they call Intel Cyber Fusion. And as part of that effort, we've dealt with millions of endpoints, very complicated networks, petabytes of data. So when we came over into the commercial space, we asked ourselves the question is, what lessons learned can we take out of that world? The one that was the 1% on Brian's slide, and bring it down to the larger, what we call the soft target space, the mid-market, folks that don't have the money, the time, the budget, the knowledge to really do the things they need to do to protect themselves. And so we left that world to come into this world to try to help solve a problem that seems to get worse. We put trillions of dollars in cyber products, trillions. We spent a lot of time talking, and yet it's just getting worse. So how do we fix that? I'm going to go through some basic topics, but the general point of this conversation is I believe we have to change the way we see cyber, and only in the sense that we always look at cyber as one or two things. The risk that's being currently put on us from the bad guys and gals, or whether you're compliant or not, because you had to do what we call checkbox bingo. Make sure that you check all the controls. But no one's really thinking about what does it mean to be a mature organization from a cyber perspective. Everyone calls maturity cyber maturity, but that's usually a one-time assessment over a 3-year period, and now you're calling yourself mature. You're not. If you're not doing this continuously, if it's not part of your organic structure of your business, just like finance, just like human resources, if cyber is not part of your everyday business, you're going to have gaps, and it's not perfect. But if you think about it from the standpoint of how do we become a mature organization, it requires partnerships, right? It requires maybe just looking at things a little bit different, and that's what we'll talk about today. And I'll give you actual actions, like things you can do to help. And then I'll give you a couple of use cases of how this actually works. This, I think, I'll just let you read it and shake your head and go, yep. Those are all challenges. Everything that Brian just said is also huge challenges for this industry. That's the impact of you not doing something, right? And it's getting worse. Mandates are real, right? Everyone is like, oh, well, the government sort of mandates stuff. Well, insurance companies are mandating things for real. Your insurance rates are going to go skyrocket if they don't already, if you're not doing the right things. Talk a little bit about that as well. All right, and this is sort of goes to my general point is most people, how many people woke up this morning, checked their phone and said, what's our risk posture today for our company? Probably nobody, maybe a couple. The reality is risk is a function of a moment in time in most of our organizations. When someone came in and looked at it, or when we evaluated it through all the different pieces of what is risk, it's the susceptibility of your organization to bad things, your ability to react to those bad things, and the impact of such bad thing hitting your organization and your ability to respond, right? If you're not doing this every day, if this is not part of your key performance indicators as an organization, there's a gap, right? Because you're not looking at that risk in a real way. I'm going to jump down to compliance because this is the mandate piece. Compliance is pretty much a yes or no, right? You can't be almost compliant. You sort of can with OAMs, but I was going to say you can't be almost pregnant, but maybe you can. So compliance is more or less that third party coming and telling you you met all the controls, great job, gives you the certificate, and now you're good for 3 years, right? So what do you do after that? You rest, you relax, you're like, oh good, we're good. And then for 3 years, what do you do? Maturity is about sort of the mindset, the different way we should look at cyber. It's a journey, right? It's not a moment in time. It's how do we think about cyber? How do we think about making our organizations more mature? It's not a one-day thing. It's a relationship with the vendors. It's a relationship with Catalyst. People who can help you grow and work with you to grow and become more mature. That's policies, that's technology, that's practice. It's all those kinds of things that you need to look at as you're growing as an organization. And the biggest problem we have is most of this stuff is what they call self-attestation. It's a horrible word. But if people say we're good, yeah, as an organization, we're good. And you know, that doesn't feel right to me. If I'm saying my organization is good, it's as good as what I'm willing to share and say that my organization is bad. So the self-attestation part is another part that's keeping us, I think, continually vulnerable to all the stuff that Brian just was talking about. And so we'll talk a little bit about all these. But risk, everything comes in the form of like, you know, no one knows what risk is, by the way. Like if I said, what is your risk score? You know, you'll be like, I don't know. And then what makes up your risk score? It's like your credit report. When you see your credit, you know, you log in, you're like, oh my God, a 700, whatever it is. And then you're like, well, why did it go down and why did it go up? You know, it's like magic. I don't know. I didn't spend as much, so it went down. I don't understand that. But anyway, all these things are part of understanding the ways you have to look at it. And most of the industry looks at risk differently. This whole group of people out there are focused on risk. A whole people are focused on compliance. No one's holistically focusing on these things. And this should not be a surprise. I will just show you the eye chart for the first one. That, right? That is just a snapshot of the vendors serving all of us on a regular basis, which is great, right? We have lots of choices. For most businesses in our world, that's confusion. Like, how do we pick from that list? And if you're trying to embark on that maturity journey, where do you even start? And so, you know, that becomes generally the first point of like your head explodes when you're really trying to go into this, like where to start. That's why you go to catalysts, because they'll guide you, they'll help you get through that initial phase of holy crap, where are we about to embark on? And then if you look at the next three, it's all what we know is the industry doesn't have enough people that know about this stuff. Even the people that know about this stuff don't really know about this stuff. And so you got a really small part of the market that is probably in pretty good shape, but the rest is pretty much what we call soft targets in the government world. There are organizations that are easily exposed, can be as launch points to other cyber attacks, can be part of a whole ecosystem of cyber crimes, because you're really struggling with the fact that you just can't find the right talent. And most of the organizations we deal with don't even have an IT manager, right? Because they're small to mid-size. They don't have, surely don't have a CISO. And so when you start talking to those organizations, how can you fill those gaps? And then we go down to that maturity, that compliance. There's over 250 compliance frameworks on the globe. It's a standard. Each of them are called standards. So you have 250 standards. I don't think it's a standard anymore. The point is, when we ran all of these things through a machine learning model. And when you run all these things through a machine learning model, you see that there's a clustering of these controls. Out of those thousands upon thousands of controls, there's only 300 actual semantically specific controls. But yet we have to be PCI compliant, we have to be HIPAA compliant, we have to be this compliant. Each one of those is $30,000, $45,000, $60,000. But they're all predicated on the basic concept of maturity, controls. How are you doing your work? The blocking and tackling, right? And the mandates are real. I mean, they're not going away. More and more people are going to be telling you if you don't do it, you're going to either not get a contract, you're not going to be able to work with us because you're part of our supply chain, which we work with the government. So government, supply chain, you're not going to be able to do business. And this right here on the right-hand side for the insurance people, I'm not hating on you. I'm just telling you I just filled out 8 forms in the last week about attesting to my cybersecurity. All I wanted to do was give them a link to my dashboard. Say, log in here and you will see everything you need to see. We're not there. We're going to keep filling these forms out until someone changes the way we look at this stuff. And it's frustrating. When you have the answers, when you don't have the answers, this is awesome. Yes, 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 yes. But when you actually have the answers, all you want to do is give them the link to and I'll show you an example of that. Now, out of everything that Brian said, all that stuff that's going on in the world, all the recommendations, when we interview all state, like about 18 state CISOs, they're like, these are the 5 things we've seen in all the ransomware attacks within our counties, states, municipalities. I saw other things, but these are the big ones. So when you look at it, what did Brian say? RDP, remote desktop protocols, right? how do you restrict those? You either lock them down or you have to be monitoring those so that if somebody's connecting to them, you can get alerted. Poor patch practice, if you don't know what patch practice is, I mean, it's fundamentally the function that you have vulnerabilities and how fast can you patch those? What's that cadence look like? Do you patch criticalities in a week, 2 days? Never. And if you're not patching it, then you're vulnerable. And then you're also susceptible, right? And those are two separate things. This next one is one he spoke about as well. It's disaster recovery. Disaster recovery and response, right? A lot of people think if you're just backing up your data to the cloud, you're good. Your files are being backed up, you know, all your pictures of your family members, all your documents are good. But in Baltimore City, when they got ransomware by attack, they thought they were good because they had all their stuff backed up to 3 different clouds. But what they realized is once they tried to recover those backups, all the configurations, all those little nuanced things that they changed every single day to be able to bill you for an electric bill, were no longer part of that backup. So for 8 months, I didn't get a bill, which was awesome, until you get the big bill. But the point is backing stuff up is not good enough. You have to test your ability to respond, the tabletop stuff that Brian was talking. And then humans are the weakest link, right? That is the case. That's training, that's education, that's culture. As we were talking last night at dinner, is the C staff of a group that's, manufacturing, building. He's like, they don't want to hear anything about this. They don't want to know anything about it. And that's a shame. Because if the C staff is not looking at this, then it's most likely not going to be a culturally accepted thing. And so we've got to change that. And then two-factor authentication. What we saw with all those remote people from the days of COVID is when you don't have two-factor authentication, I'm going to send that person an email, and it's going to look like it's coming from someone because they spoof the email. It's going to have an HTML file, obfuscated HTML file in it. You're going to click on it. It's going to look like Google. It's going to look like Microsoft because they did that social engineering research. It's going to look like your website. You're going to enter your username and password. It's going to fail. You're going to do it again. It's going to fail. The third time you do it, it's going to take you to your actual Microsoft login screen. In the meantime, they just got your password, right? Now they're logging in to yours to send emails to all of your people from them, so no longer spoofed. And now they're going to send a PDF file that person's going to trust and download. And this is how it works. And endpoint detection, CrowdStrike, I'll send one. None of these are going to fix that problem because this is a human-built problem. So if you were to focus on anything, if you only had a budget of X, focus on 1, 5, and 2. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying for most of the organizations, you're not being attacked by China. You're not being attacked by Iran. You're being attacked by cyber criminals. This is the easy path for them. If you can fix those things quickly, you're going to be in a good place. And then just we'll reinforce how convoluted this trillions of dollars there, and we're still getting hacked every single day. And then this is just a reflection of, the problem that we're seeing across the board. So outside of just the threat part that Brian talked about, your ability to buy infrastructure, implement best practices, build good policies, and actually practice those policies, that's hard. That's time, that's energy, that's money. And a lot of the folks that we deal with don't have, like I said, the budget, the people, or the know-how to do it. And then those fines on the right side, those will continue to come, but this isn't to scare you into this. This is just to say that, mandates are always those things. No one wants to be mandated to do anything. And so take off the mandate part and say, let's just try to figure out how we can do this better ourselves. And you'll get a lot of cool things out of that. If you actually practice good cyber maturity, what they call cyber hygiene, that risk score is going to come out of that. You're going to get a really good risk score. You're also going to be compliant. And so if you just practice that maturity piece, you get all of those other things, and we'll show you examples of that. Okay. So risk is not maturity or compliance. If I know my risk today, it doesn't mean I'm compliant, it doesn't mean I'm mature. It just means for today, no one's attacking me, right? Compliance, if I'm compliant today, it doesn't mean I'm mature. I was probably mature the day I got the certificate that said I was compliant. But 2 days later, I don't patch my vulnerabilities, I'm no longer a quote-unquote mature organization. But if you're truly a mature organization, one who's doing best practices, just as part of their business model, you will get risk and compliance out of that. And so these are the things, you know, sort of we're looking at to the right side. Everything we talked about in the previous slides. But, you know, when it comes down to it, what can we do? One, the first thing you should do is find a trusted partner like Catalyst or somebody who knows this industry, who can inform you and help you grow. Again, if this is seen as a one-time thing, probably not useful. If this becomes a journey for all of us to go on together to figure out a way we can better harden our infrastructure and communicate. And the one thing we saw through all of our analysis is that if you are actually having continuous monitoring of all of your data, meaning your cloud data for a SOC, whether it's internal or external, don't really care. All your data is being monitored and detected on and alerted on. That gives you 53% coverage of any framework, meaning any compliance framework. Just by doing that, you get 53% control. So if I'm someone and I'm like, oh, what could I do today? I would say find someone who's cost effective, who can monitor all of your infrastructure. And then that feeds into the path of what we've been talking about, is data drives risk, data drives maturity, data drives compliance. So we always say, just give us your data. We're not gonna ask you how many firewalls you have, how many endpoints you have. We say, give it to us, give all your data, because as soon as we get all your data, we can correlate all that, tell you what your maturity score is, tell you what your risk score is, tell you what whether you're compliant ready or not. And then start small. I mean, just start, right? If you're not doing something, talk to Catalyst, talk to somebody who knows this, and just two-factor authentication. That's easy. I mean, I'll say it's easy for most companies, not easy for all. The more and more people go to cloud, they're like, cloud is our answer. We don't have to do anything if we're in the cloud. Not right. We have plenty of O365 organizations that haven't implemented two-factor authentication, and we see them hacked, or at least the accounts being compromised, almost, you know, on a regular weekly basis. Because what happens is we see a whole bunch of these emails out in the dark web. Those emails go to the dark web, those passwords get out of the dark web, someone tries to log in, no two-factor authentication, and guess what? They're into their O365. They can only get so far because they have a geo-block on some of their SharePoint and other things. So the point is, just the little stuff. Just the little stuff. Not a lot of money in this. I mean, if you're a large organization, it probably is a decent chunk of money, but you probably have a lot of this stuff already. If you're a smaller, mid-sized organization, that's the answer. Well, it's at least the answer we've seen so far. That is, I have two use cases, if you want to hear, that actually sort of speak to this. This is, if you remember Brian's slide, that one that was up at the very top, DivNet, the Defense Industrial Base. We have a small organization, about 30-person company, came to us and said, in order for us to do business with our prime contractor, they said we have to be CMMC compliant. And I was like, what does that mean, compliant? Well, you just have to conform to CMMC. If you haven't heard about it, it's just another one of those 250 frameworks I was telling you about. The government says you have to be aligned to. So they went out and looked for a third-party assessor, and they said about $30,000. They're a 30-person company. $30,000 to do this assessment to say whether they're CMMC certified. So they came to us, and because what we've built is this, everything I'm telling you about is, the reason I'm telling you about it is because we built it, is the ability to, one, take all the data and do all the work for you. So if, for instance, you're doing CSF as a framework or HIPAA, all those questions that they're going to ask you, you know, every question you've ever been asked, we want to answer those for you with data. Give us all that data, we're going to answer those questions for you. And so what we were able to do within the kickoff meeting, do a very quick technology survey. And this technology survey was based upon us basically running, again, all these assessments through a machine learning natural language processing engine. And what this would do is cluster key technologies that were mentioned in any of these assessments. And what you get about 24 key technologies that were used across all these frameworks. So instead of asking 59 questions about asset management, we ask you a couple of questions of how you implemented asset management, and you get credit for those 59. You get some portion of credit across those 59 controls. So we do that. We ask them if they have policies. You think they have policies? No. So we give them policies. We give them 34 best practice policies and say the faster you can do these, the faster you believe in what these policies say, best practice policies, you get them back to us. We have a natural language processing engine that scores these policies. If you've ever been through an assessment, they ask you if you have policies. You say no, they go out on the internet, you get a policy, you upload it to SharePoint or Google, they review them, they tell you your policy sucks, you should add some more things, and this goes on for weeks at a time. So we built an engine where you just upload the policy, we'll score it, and we'll tell you exactly where to tweak. So we were able to do all that in the first kickoff meeting. So assess their technology. We don't know for sure anything they told us is true, right? But assess their technology by asking those technology questions, not control questions, and we assessed all their policies by scoring them semantically across all the controls. And after that, we said, give us all, they're pretty much an O365 shop. They have an incubator, so they're part of like a college incubator. So they're sharing the network. They have four machines, sharing it with a firewall for the entire incubator. We said, you should probably create your own firewall. $1,500, real nice firewall, Fortinet firewall, put it there, configure it for those machines, segregate yourself from that network. Give us all your O365 data. You probably need CrowdStrike SentinelOne on your critical assets, and give us all that. And so that happened in the that first part happened in the first week. Second week, they finally got their policies back to us. They got two-factor authentication. They ordered Fortinet firewall. You can read it. Week 3, we're getting down to the point that that initial maturity score, not compliance, not risk, but maturity score that we gave them after that first day was -15. And you're asking, oh shit, why -15? We start our scoring at -2, because if you don't have any technology, you don't have any policies, you don't have anything, what Brian says is going to happen to you. You're going to be ransomware, and you're going to be either paying someone money for stuff that they stole from you, or they encrypted. And so we start you off at -2, say you at least need some base things to get above that 0. It's psychology, right? But they got the score, the first day. And now psychology would say, what do we need to do to get better? Maturity. What are the things we need to do to get better? And so we give them the path of righteousness. We tell them exactly what they need to do. They go off and do it because now we're a partner with them. And they're excited. And in less than 30 days, they go from a -15 to 2.04. Maturity. I'm not telling you they're compliant. I'm just telling you that from everything that we can see and all the O365 policies that they changed, everything that they did, the policies they uploaded, the Fortinet, the CrowdStrike, cost them $8,000 total for a 30-person company, not the $25,000 that the assessors. And they've been in the system continuously now for nine months or so, whatever that is. And you can see that spike. And each one of these tells you exactly what they did to go from the green is maturity, this is the risk, this is the day-to-day from us monitoring their stuff. You can see when we weren't monitoring their stuff. And then when we started, the maturity went up. So all these things are connected. And the reality is they got to a place where they got motivated to give us policies because they saw that score change. And the really cool thing about that score is going to change every day because we're monitoring your vulnerabilities, we're monitoring all of your threats. And so if you're not patching vulnerabilities, your maturity score is going to go down just a teeny bit. Your risk score is going to go up probably a little bit. That's the continuous part of this, and that's the maturity. Like knowing what has happened over the last 12 months instead of knowing that I did this, and then 12 months later I did it again. So that's a 30-person organization. They're now at a 3.2 from a maturity standpoint, and I would believe they could pass any audit right now. So if the prime, and this was able to allow them to start working for that prime contractor because they were able to get all this data to this prime contractor and say, yeah, we are now, here's all the things we have. A state election board, a much bigger organization. They came to us and their fundamental problem is we don't want to be hacked for the elections. This was back in May. It's a medium state, so they have about 35 election sites. They have one headquarters, they have 2 data centers, well, I'm not going to tell you where they are. The same exact model. In that first hour meeting, we assessed, we knew a lot about their technology because it was in the RFP and all that other good stuff. We assessed their technology, we gave them POAMs, we told them, you know, give us all your policies. They gave us all their policies, we scored them. So on the first day, we showed them exactly between the technology and the policies where their weaknesses were. And every weakness they had was not in technology, because they had some of the best technology you can get. It's in the policies. And we showed them exactly where the policy enhancements should be. So did that, and now all they were really concerned about, they weren't concerned about compliance. They were concerned about the threat part. Are you monitoring our data? So we absorbed all their data, firewall data, endpoint data, McAfee, Sentinel-1, you name it. It's all coming into the environment in which we're now correlating it for threat detection, meaning SOC, and also for compliance. Everything that we run is correlated and feeding both of those things all at the same time. Give us your data, you get both of those. And so we go through this, get all the data in, you can read that. Their initial maturity score was 2.2 because their technology was solid. And they had some policies. They were in pretty decent shape at the beginning. And so over the last, whatever it was, 8 months, 6 months, we've been monitoring all their stuff. And over that period of time, they didn't upload any new policy, they didn't do anything. They were just from us detecting and managing and then patching and all the right things, their maturity score went from 2.2 to 2.55 in less than 60 days. Now, why is that interesting? Because just in the last month, we met with them and did our quarterly review, and they said, we just got through a Department of Transportation audit. And they said, how did you get our number? I was like, we didn't get your number. What do you mean? How did we get your what number? How did you get our maturity number? Because they gave us 2.57, and you're saying yours is 2.55. And you're also saying our policies are weak, and that's exactly what they said. 3 months ago, if you would have listened to us, we told you your policies are weak. We would have given you those policies. But they didn't, and that's okay. So guess what the first thing they did? Hey, can we get those templated policies? And so they took the policies. They're going to update their policies. But again, having that historical perspective of both risk and their maturity, because they are pretty much a mature organization, you don't see these big spikes, right? And that's good. But they need to get better. 255 is good, but they still have some things they need to do. And I think this is the difference, right? Self-attestation, checkbox bingo is what I call it, and you can see that, which is telling you your risk score, your maturity score, it's telling you across whatever framework you selected. The beautiful part of this application is no matter what framework you select, we can map to it. If you want CSF, you want ISO, it doesn't really matter because remember that initial stuff I told you about we did? So the point being is you have now one view into risk, maturity, and eventually we'll have a compliance readiness box up there that will tell you that you're ready to go through an audit with all the artifacts, all the data that we've collected over the last year. And so I'd rather give the insurance company that view, continuous view of our maturity, than possibly just feeding that to them every year. And I think that's it, yeah. And some of these other things that are just interesting to see. It takes a lot of money to build these things. If you're building your own SOC, if you're building your own all this stuff, this is why for most companies outsourcing the SOC, outsourcing these things makes sense. And that's pretty much it. That's what I've got.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions?
For level setting, they start at -2.
Yep.
What would you say would be an ideal or possible score?
It depends on what their organization is. Like you will say to us that you want to be ISO compliant. Just to say that. We're going to ask you, what maturity level are you striving for? And we explain what that means. Do you want to be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 maturity? No one's picking 5 because that hurts people's head. Most people are like, go in the middle. I want to be a 3. They might be audit ready at 1 or 2 from a maturity standpoint, but we try to say, let's shoot for 3 because that puts us the target out here. Everything that we'll do will get you to 3 if you not listen, but if you sort of absorb the recommendations, the POAMs we give you, you'll get to a 3. And if all you need to do is be 2 in order to get ISO certified, then you'll be fine. So it's a conversation that you have is like, what is your goal? If you're a manufacturing, if you're part of supply chain, if you're in these critical infrastructure pieces, we're gonna at least start at 3. Be like, this is where you should strive for. If you're a small organization, have O365, maybe a 2. I mean, again, it's just a number. We use it as a gating of where do you want to be versus anything that we're judging you on, if that makes sense. All right. Yep.
As far as, it takes a lot of time and effort for somebody to go fill out this questionnaire, so when clients get those, how successful have you seen clients hand a link over to somebody and have the auditors go through that list and map it to what's in your system?
You mean the question from the insurance company?
Yeah, as an example.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the mapping, if they're mapping to this, say they're mapping to HIPAA, right? Although the insurance companies don't ask you for like a standard, they just ask you a bunch of questions, right? If they're not mapped to a control, we're not going to be able to show you the direct mapping to that. But what we can show the insurance company or anybody that's asking you those questions is here's how we look at CSF, here's how we look at NIST 851. And then we can export all that. They can look at the controls, they see what you're scoring across practice, policy, and technology is. They see all the artifacts, they see all the policies, right? They see whatever other evidence that you may have uploaded towards that end. So if someone comes to us with a whole new compliance framework, which every state does, like they'll take CSF and add 3 more things, that same machine learning engine that sort of broke it all apart now can take that and map that to our, we run SCF, which is the large, like in the back end, security compliance framework. It's about 1,000 controls. That is what our system is built on. So everything after that we can map to, because if you're mapping to all of them, we can now feed any of those other controls or frameworks that are underneath. And so we can on the fly map, if you want to see how you look like HIPAA, it will go in and readjust all your scores, all your coverage, everything, and show you how you look from HIPAA. If you want to look at how do I look from PCI, do the same thing. It's all built into the platform. You don't have to export and do any, big data munging thing. So I know that's a long-winded answer too. I'm just trying to give you context, if that makes sense.
I get a lot of questions from customers about what they need to share with their board of directors from a relevance, and those guys are asking them, how mature are we? Are we safe? They want that kind of warm and fuzzy. What do you see being those top metrics, so to speak, that successful organizations are rolling to their leadership teams?
It depends on what part, like these personas, like you have a CEO, a CFO, right? Yep. They want to know what their risk is, what the return on investment is. If I've just given the organization $200,000 for new hardware, new software, what is the impact of that? So I want to be able to see in the same dashboard, I want to be able to see my score go from a 1.8 to a 2.4 from this investment, and now we can see the return on investment. So we can show the board, hey, our investment's now created a maturity level of this. I can show the board what my risk score is. This is our daily risk. Here's the historical risk. This is when we invested money. Our risk score has been down ever since. So it's the culmination of all this data into whatever persona you might be talking to. If you're talking to a CISO, they're going to want to look at all the controls and policies and stuff like that. Yeah. But for a CEO, like, how exposed am I? And if something happened, how much money would I lose? And so as part of as we're ingesting data, we have to understand the criticality of the assets that we're monitoring, right? If we know it's a financial transaction system, and if that got exposed, that would be worth a loss of $200,000. That's in the system, so now we can say if that were to be, exploited, there's a possibility that you're gonna be $200,000 out from transactional stuff for 3 days or 4 days. So, but they gotta have confidence in these numbers. When you give someone a number, the first thing they're gonna ask you, and it's what you all should ask, is how's that number created, right? And so for every one of these numbers, there's a drill down of exactly what built up that number. Whether it's a policy, whether it's technology, whether it's the fact that we detected 3 things, and you still have 3 tickets sitting there waiting to be closed for the last 3, 4, 5 days, and they were critical alerts. That all feeds those things that you'll be able to sort of assess how are we doing from a maturity standpoint.
Got it.
It all comes down to how risky, how exposed are we? Yeah. Cool. All right, thank you.
Duane, thank you. Guys, we're gonna take 10 minutes, use the restrooms, refill coffee, etc. But Duane, thank you very much. And next up is Evan, and he's gonna parlay into what you just heard from a cyber insurance perspective, and give you guys a completely different vantage point on how to solve that problem. So we'll get kicked back off right at 9:50 and look forward to it. Thank you guys. Thank you, Duane.